I was having a conversation with my cousin, Dom Polito, who has been on the podcast three separate times. Go check him out. Episode 36, episode 59, and episode 94. Nonetheless, Dom and I were having a conversation over the weekend, and he told me a story about how on his mom's side, his great grandfather was in World War II. And one of the stories that the family remembers is that his grandfather would talk about the time where he could hear bullets whizzing past his ears. And Dom said that it made him realize that he himself was here all because his grandpa's head was in the right place. If he was 1 or 2 inches left or right, his family's lineage could have been cut off before Dom ever had a chance to get here. Of course, I was blown away by that, and I know that I brought up in the podcast before. I read an article that talked about the percentage of you being you, and it walks through all the numbers and all the probabilities that it would take for you to come from an unbroken chain of ancestors who met at the right time, and the exact sperm met the exact egg that was necessary to make you. That percentage is basically zero. So if you're interested in that type of thing like I am, I would suggest to go check out the percentage of you being you. If you throw that into Google, you'll get the article that I'm talking about. Nonetheless, it had me thinking of how grateful I am just to be alive, just to be here. On a personal note, from my own family, my grandfather on my dad's side, unfortunately, he passed away when I was about 2 years old, so I haven't had the opportunity to discuss his heritage from a firsthand basis. But being an African American from the South, he was born, I believe, in the 20s or the 30s. And when I looked back at his lineage on heritage.com, what I found was that his family was from South Carolina. And the furthest I could go back was what seemed to be his dad's dad, so my grandpa's grandpa, whose first record in his heritage shows up in the early 60s in South Carolina. And when you think about the Civil War that emancipated African Americans from slavery, that had concluded in 1965. And I believe, I'm not exactly sure what the date was, but I know it was earlier than 1865. And I don't have any proof, I don't have any evidence for this, but all I can do is the math. And the math to me, and I ask myself, is, what is a black man doing in South Carolina before the end of World War II? And to me, I'm left to believe that there's a high probability that that person, my grandpa's grandpa, was a slave. And to have that realization makes me extremely grateful for the amount of progress that our society and our culture has made, and I can attest that we still have room and opportunity to grow, but I think that will always be the case. And I also think that if my grandfather's grandfather were to jump in a time machine and come to 2019 and see me and see his lineage living on and the opportunities that I've been exposed to, I believe that he would be immensely happy and immensely proud of what our family and our culture and our community, the progress that we've been able to make. I think about my grandfather, my dad's dad, who grew up on a sharecropping farm in South Carolina in the early part of the 1900s. I think he would look at my standard of living, and I think he would look at all the opportunities that have been presented to me and people like me, people that come from a lower middle class place in society. I think that he would be astonished with all the opportunities and access to information that I enjoy today. And of course, there's people that have been less fortunate than me. There's people that have had much more hardships. I've had friends that have come from very, very menial places of life with not a lot of money, not a lot of support, and even so, the opposite, a lot of aggressiveness and abuse and violence, both verbally and non-verbally. But even with those people that I have a relationship with, they still have the ability to choose how they're going to decide to look at the world, how they're going to decide to take on the opportunities that are available to them at that moment. To me, I always think about what would happen to the podcast, what would happen to my other projects if my 8-year-old MacBook went down, since the battery seems to keep dying on me. And my go-to plan, my protocol if that happens, is to go to a library. I know that Ray Roberts and we recorded our last podcast at the library, and he made a lot of good jokes about the library, but nonetheless, libraries in them of themselves are an opportunity. Not only the books, I think it's evident that having access to literature and to education that books provide is invaluable. But most libraries, and I'm not sure when the last time you've been in one since we've been able to order books same day from Amazon or even order it off our Kindle. But libraries, the libraries that I've been into between Akron, Cleveland, and Youngstown, not only offer resources for books, but they also offer resources of technology and resources for business. So for me, primarily, not only having access to information, but having access to things such as Adobe Creative Cloud, where if you yourself were interested, you could make your own podcast, you could do your own video editing, you could do your own creative projects all for free at the library. So the point is that we have all this access to information and resources. It at times can seem frustrating because we have a long way to go between how we treat each other and how we treat people that are different from us. But we've come a long way from where the people that got us here have come from. And just to be here, just to be able to speak these words into this microphone is a miracle. Because Don Polito, his grandfather's head was in the right place at the right time, which gave us 3 episodes to record. And my grandfather and the other ancestors that I have in my lineage embody what it means to endure and to survive and to pass down a legacy. And that brings us to us. That brings us to this moment in our species history. And it brings us to this place where we should be grateful for what we've been able to achieve and what's available to us. But we also have to have the clarity and the patience to leverage those opportunities and build on it for generations to come. So thank you for listening. Shout out to Don Polito's grandpa. Shout out to my grandpa. Shout out to your grandpa. And hopefully 50 years from now, we will be getting shout outs from our grandchildren. Thank you.